So I'm honored to have Mohammad Bakri and Michael Sfard with us today to discuss both the film and the reaction to it. I'll begin by introducing them very briefly, and then, as I mentioned before, I will ask each one of them one question, and then we will open it up to further questions from the audience. You can write your questions in the Q&A tab on the bottom. So Mohammad Bakri, in a way, for me, he was, he was when I was growing up, he was a celebrity in Israel. He was probably one of the 2-3 major actors in film in Israel. He was, he was the Alain Delon of Israel as a child. That was who he was for me. He's a director, a producer, screenwriter, and actor. Beginning his professional career in theater over 40 years ago, and has played in dozens of local, international films and TV shows. And he has produced and directed documentary films focusing on the Palestinian struggle. 1948 came out in the year 1998. Jenin in 2002, and Since You Left in 2004. Michael Sfard is a leading Israeli human rights attorney, and leading Israeli human rights attorney is an understatement. He is probably the most important human rights lawyer in Israel today. And most of his work is on Israel and Palestinian human rights. And he works with peace organizations, movements, and activists. He's an expert in international humanitarian law and international human rights law. He's the author of The Wall and the Gate, Israel, Palestine, and the Legal Battle of Human Rights, which just came out, I think, a year or two ago. And he's the co-author of the ABC of the Occupied Palestinian Territories, or the ABC of the OPT, a legal lexicon of the Israel control of occupied Palestinian territories. One of his other co-authors is Hedy, who is also a member of the law school at Queen Mary. And Michael is here because he's also one of the representatives of Bakri in the Israeli courts, together with attorney Hussein Abu Hussein. And so my first question is to Muhammad. And as I mentioned, as I was growing up, Muhammad was a hero among liberal Zionists. Everyone loved him. He's like this super actor. He played in films that some of them dealt with kind of reconciliation between Jews and Palestinians in Israel, Palestine. And, kind of celebrity, wherever he goes, people would probably walk up to him and, want a signature, an autograph, and so forth. And then overnight, in a way, in 2002, right after the Jenin attack, he goes to the Jenin refugee camp. He makes this movie, and in a minute, in days, he becomes a pariah. The person everyone hates. The liberal Zionists suddenly hate him. He represents the enemy of Israel. And since then, for almost 20 years, it's 2021, he's been prosecuted, persecuted by the Israeli legal system, by the IDF, by soldiers. And I think he's been to numerous court cases. This is not the first time the film has been banned. In fact, it was banned right after it was released in 2002. And so my question to you, Mohammed, is is a twofold question. One, can you tell us what led you to go and do this movie? And two, what has happened since? Can you describe a bit so the audience understand what have you been going through in the past 20 years?
I studied from my own personal experience in life that it's very important, if you are dealing with entertainment, theater, music, cinema, all kinds of arts, you must be a storyteller in order to enjoy, to make the people enjoy the time they spend with you in the theater or in cinema or in music or in any kind of art. And I found out very early, when I was very young and more naive than I am now, that it's my duty and it's my duty to tell my story. And I think that Jenin is not of my best films, not because that the Israeli didn't like it, and not because I am paying a very high price since that time, just because I told my story in many other films, maybe in better way, maybe more, I don't know, maybe in more poetry and humanity. And maybe I am wrong. Maybe I am just telling nonsense now. I mean, Jenin is a continuity of my own belief that if you want peace, if you have a dream to make a peace, you must tell the story with all its details. And this is what I did in Jenin. It is not different from Zahra. It is not different from Beyond the Walls, the film that made me, as you said in the beginning, superstar. It's not different. I am the same man. I'm not changed. I did not change. Man cannot change his heart. He can change his mind, not his heart. I didn't change my heart. My heart in Jenin, the same heart in Beyond the Wall, the same heart in Since You Left, the same heart in Hanake, the same heart in all good films that I did. So the thing is, I believe, I don't know, maybe Michael can tell us more than me at this point. I believe that I touched the holy cow of the Israelis, the idea. Because my father, God bless his soul, used to tell me, Muhammad, be careful. You can touch everything in Israel, but don't touch the
security.
Security. And I believe that Israel is sick of security. And if you touch that, you are the enemy. And I'm not. So what happened since that time? I am boycotted by the Israeli institution, by the Israeli theater, by the Israeli cinema. It is not rishmi, it is not
official.
But no one dare to work with me. Very few people, very, very, very few, and they must be very brave people to have the courage to tell me, to call me and say, Mohammad, I have a part for you in the theater. Come, let's see. Very, very few people. And this is because of the consensus, you know. The Israelis are afraid. They are afraid. מהצל שלהם.
From their own shadow.
Yes. Unfortunately. If they will be less afraid, they will change their mind about me, and they will find out that I am the same man that they knew many years ago when I was nice and beautiful. That's it.
Can you just add a few words about what have gone on in the past 20 years? How many trials? What kind of persecution have you had to go through? I mean,
I think
everyone saw the film, and the film doesn't kill, it doesn't destroy houses. And yet you have been subjected for 20 years. Tell the audience. I think people need to know get a bit of a sense what you have gone through in these past 20 years.
I don't like to talk about it.
Okay.
But I think that Michael can answer about the trials and about the courts, about all the law side. But I think that the people are enough intelligent and enough clever to imagine what happened to me. That's it. I don't like to talk about it. That's it.
Okay, so let's turn to Michael. And Michael, maybe you can say a few words both about the history of this kind of campaign, the legal side of it, and then about the most recent ruling it was about a month ago, I think, or 2 months ago, that again banned the movie from showing in Israel. What's the logic of the court decision? Just take us through some of what has been going on.
That's a very mighty task to explain the logic of this court decision. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be on this webinar. And Mohammad, you're still beautiful. Don't worry. The film was released in 2002 and immediately was censored by the Israeli Cinema Board, which is a remnant of the British Mandate. During the British Mandate in Palestine, they set up a board that would provide permits for films to be screened. You couldn't just screen any film you want. And that board continued to operate during the years after Israel's establishment. And in this case, in 2002, it decided that this movie should not be aired, would not get the permit to be screened. And because of its defamatory, because it is inciting against Israeli forces, because it is, pro-Palestinian, all kinds of, and because the things that were said in the film by the different witnesses, residents of the camp, are lies. That basically was the reasoning of the board. And back then, I was a very young lawyer, but I worked together with a very renowned Israeli human rights attorney, Avigdor Feldman, who joined also the team now. And we filed a petition to the Israeli High Court of Justice, which overturned the decision of that cinema board. So the film was allowed to be aired in Israel, and that was around 2003 or 4. And a number of a group of Israeli soldiers and officers who fought in the Jenin camp had organized to start a struggle to stop this film from being screened anywhere. Now, I want to say something before I'll explain what happened next. I just want to say that it's very symbolic that in the Jenin movie, that is, sorry for interpreting you, Muhammad, but what I see in the movie, one of the central themes of the movie is the muted Palestinian, right? The fact that Palestinians cannot be heard. They don't have a voice. They don't have amplifiers. They are being silenced all the time. And the fact that this movie about the silencing of the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinian story, the Palestinian experience, specifically in that operation in Jenin, is in itself a subject of an attempt to silence, of silencing and censorship, is amazing. I mean, this is exactly what happens in the film, is what happens to the film. And so a group of soldiers have filed a libel suit against Muhammad, and that libel suit was litigated for many years in several instances, and eventually Muhammad won that libel suit. But the judges have concluded they did not like the film, the Israeli Supreme Court judges. They did not like the film. They thought the film is full of exaggerations and lies. But they did accept the argument that the film talks about the IDF in general, and the Israeli army in general, and those forces that were operating in Jenin. And that does not provide each and every soldier who was part of these forces a personal basis to sue Muhammad. And that is, and these litigations took, I think, many years, and they ended with the Muhammad winning in court, in the sense that the movie could continue to be screened in Israel, but with a lot of damage caused to Muhammad, as he described, with the soldiers organizing demonstrations against him wherever he went, wherever he tried to work. There were demonstrations outside, not only the soldiers, but other right-wing groups in Israel. Then in 2016, a new defamation case was filed. And this is the one that ended 2 months ago in the district court in Lod, also very symbolic in Lod. This new defamation was also mobilized by this group of soldiers from Jenin that wanted to silence and to censor and to stop this movie from being presented and screened. What they did was they found one soldier who is seen in the film for 3.5 seconds. I'll tell the people who just saw now, the audience who are on this webinar who saw the film, if you remember, there was an old guy who was holding a knife and telling his story of how he was pillaged by soldiers, how soldiers took his money. Now, while he was talking, there were 2 short scenes of soldiers, one of 3 soldiers moving in an alley, and another scene of 3 soldiers in a military vehicle's parking lot, walking from the middle of the screen to the right-hand side of the screen. So that's 3.5 seconds, maybe 4 seconds. And one of those 3 soldiers is the one that filed this defamation suit. And they tried to say, well, you know, the Supreme Court has indeed ruled that it is not possible for anyone, for every soldier who was there in Jenin to sue Muhammad, because the film doesn't name specific people who and accuses specific individuals. But if there is someone who is seen in the film, then he can sue. Now that, of course, legally speaking, that's my understanding of defamation law, is a complete nonsense, because the audience, and you have just experienced it now, and you can yourself testify to it, the audience understands that these soldiers that you see from time to time in different intercuts in the movie are generic soldiers. The filmmaker does not provide a sense that these are the soldiers who did this, the acts that the residents of Jenin are telling you about. Anyway, this is the case that ended 2 months ago with a very, very bizarre decision. I think very wrong decision, very harsh decision, not only to find Muhammad responsible for defaming that specific individual who, again, was seen for 3 seconds moving from one side of the screen to the other, but also, and that is the most bizarre thing about the decision, instead of ordering these 3 seconds to be taken out of the film, it concluded and issued an injunction that said this film cannot be screened at all in Israel. Now, the difference between the decision of the High Court of Justice of Israel in 2003 that overturned the cinema board's decision and said, no, this film is full, that's how they saw it, full of exaggerations, full of lies, and yet the freedom of expression allows Muhammad to air this film, and if someone has a different angle, they can produce their own film. And by the way, Israeli soldiers produced 2 films in response to Jenin. The difference between that position of the court 19 years ago or 18 years ago and the court 2 months ago shows you how Israel deteriorated in the sense of individual freedoms, in the sense of how the authoritarian trend is capturing everything. Not only Muhammad is an outcast, a persona non grata, but now his film is not allowed to be aired. And if not, this screening now was done from a computer in the UK, that would be a violation of the injunction. So I'll stop here. That's an attempt to summarize 20 years of litigations. And by the way, of course, this is not the end, because we are appealing to the Israeli Supreme Court. So it will take a few more months or years.
Thank you. Mohammad, you probably don't know, but I taught at Ben Gurion University for 17 years. And the first time I got in trouble with the university is because of you. The film came out in 2002, and as Michael just explained, it was immediately censored. But the censoring was such that you cannot screen it in a public place, but you can screen it at home. I was teaching then Introduction to Political Theory, and it just came out. There was the censor, and I was teaching Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. And Thomas Hobbes basically constructs a state in the Leviathan where the sovereign is this kind of tyrant in a sense. And so I decided to screen the movie in the class. I called Yael Lehrer at the time. She was a good friend of mine. I think she was dealing with, and she sent me the movie. And I screened it. There were maybe 100 or 200 students in the class. And I justified it by giving them an assignment, asking them, would Thomas Hobbes censor the movie? And to show the relation between this act of censoring of artistic work that doesn't fit with the narrative that the sovereign wants to tell the people, and of course the university, it went to the media, and the university got angry at me, but that is all history. Anyway, there's several questions on the Q&A board, and I invite other people to ask as well. The first question is, or maybe not the first, but one of the questions, what was the Israeli objective? Why such destruction at Jenin rather than somewhere else? Is it retribution for something? Was Jenin the political center of the Palestinian resistance?
Perhaps, yes. Perhaps the Israelis say, the official declaration of the Israeli government was that all the most of the suicide bombers came from Jenin. So they somehow, the IDF, the government wanted to displace Jenin from where the suicide bombers came. That was the declaration. And unfortunately, the Palestinian resistance gave Sharon at that time the green light to go in by a very harsh suicide bomber in Leil HaSeder, in the most holy
Passover.
Yes, night for the Jews, while they were making Seder. And somebody came from the area of Jenin, from Burkin. I think his name is Shadi, I'm not sure. And he's suicide in Malone Park in Netanya. And there was 23 people were killed, and many people were wounded very hard. And it was in the 29 or 28 or 29 of March 2002. At the 2nd of April, the operation started on Jenin, on the camp Jenin. And Sharon reoccupied the whole country, the whole West Bank and Gaza. This is one side. The other thing that happened in Jenin, 23 soldiers were killed, Israeli, in the camp. And I think it makes I felt that the destruction and the massive attack on Jenin was also some kind of taking revenge, some kind of litnakem, because it was a very, 23 soldiers are for the Israeli IDF. It's a very huge, a lot of people. And it's beside what I said in the beginning. I think that's the reason. But I believe that Sharon didn't need a reason to keeping occupying the country, because he was one of the people who found the ideology of settlements. I mean, he's one of the first people who decided to build in the West Bank. And Ariel, the big town, the biggest town in the West Bank, Ariel, it's his name, Ariel Sharon. So, but I believe that this suicide bombing in Netanya, which was really very, very hard, and people who were innocent were killed. Which is bad, very bad. But in the meantime, it gave Sharon on a silver plate to do whatever he wants. Even if he don't need that to do it.
Few people, Muhammad, a few people are asking if you have connections still or know what has happened with the people you interviewed, and particularly a few people asked if you know what happened, as one of them said, with the brilliant, eloquent, and angry young girl in the film.
All the people ask me this question. I really don't know why. Maybe because she is so beautiful, this girl, I think. And now she is, for sure, a very ripe woman, nice, beautiful woman, I believe. Yes, I met her several times after Jenin, after the film. I met her. I came to visit her in her school. I joined my wife because she was learning for a girls' school. You cannot go like a man inside. So I joined with Laila, my wife, joined me to go to the school, and I visited her in one of the Chagim, Al-Adha Chag. And recently, 2 years, maybe 1.5 years ago, during the last court, court which is happening now, I went to meet her again, but she was not there. She was in Dubai. And I found out that she is married and she has 4 kids, 4 children. Yes, I have somehow contact with the people, not every day and not every month, but once in a while I'm going to Jenin to visit the people who are still alive, because many are dead now from the people who were in the film. 20 years, you know.
Yeah, it's not a short period. Michael, a question for you. Someone is asking whether if you can say just a few words. I know you had an op-ed either today or yesterday in Haaretz about the ICC decision to investigate Israel. And the question is whether they are planning to also investigate the war crimes carried out in Jenin that are presented in Muhammad's film.
No, the ICC has jurisdiction over crimes that have been committed by either Israelis or Palestinians in Palestine from June of 2014. That was a decision that was taken by the government of Palestine when they ratified the Rome Statute of the ICC, They have indicated that they provide the court with the jurisdiction in matter of time for actions or incidents or crimes that were committed since June of 2014, which was the month when Operation Defensive Edge, I think it's called, took place in Gaza. So no, everything that happened before 2014 is not in the jurisdiction of the court.
Another question from Muhammad. Someone says, you're a Palestinian citizen of Israel. How hard is it for you to go to Jenin with the equipment? Do you need permission? How did you go about doing it? What was the technicalities or the political difficulties of going to Jenin? Did you need to get permission from the IDF? What was going on there?
No, I didn't ask any permission from anybody because when I came in Jenin, it was during the operation. I mean, not during the fighting, but it was like 4 or 5 days after the operation finished, but the area was still sieged for a military place that you cannot go in. So I sneaked. I did something against the law. Now I admit.
You have to talk to me before you admit.
Yes, it's too late, Michael, too late. Anyway, so I came in Jenin in a very not legal way, and I didn't ask any permission from anybody. And it took me, I'm far from Jenin, like half an hour, 40 minutes by car, and it took me like 6 hours to go in, to arrive, because everything was closed around, and there was many vehicles, many army, a lot of army still in the area, sieging the place, and it was quite very dangerous to go in, to sneak like listanin. How do you say listanin?
Infiltrator.
Yes. So it wasn't easy. And all the film, I mean, when I came there, I had no script, I had no plane, I had nothing. I had just one camera and one sound man. We were 3 people. No production, no batikh, nothing. And there was no electricity also, and there was no restaurant, nothing. Everything is closed, you know. It's under curfew, and it was really quite dangerous. I mean, it wasn't easy. And I wanted I was rushing to finish shooting, to go home back, to go back home to my children and my wife, because I was really scared. It was quite, as I said, very dangerous. Anyway, so it took me like 4 days and 1 night, 4 nights and 1 day, sorry. 4 days and nights and half day. The 5th day was a half day to finish shooting. And I had a lot of material, like between 18 to 20 hours of shooting. And then the editing started. And it took me like 3 months to edit the material for the final draft that you saw tonight. That's it.
A few more questions. Michael, Craig Jones from the University of Newcastle asks, he says, you mentioned in the final statement when you talked that there's been this change in the Israeli legal system that you're kind of noticing. You've been working on human rights for, I don't know, 30 years, 25, 30 years now. Can you elaborate a bit about that change and what have you witnessed?
So I think, there are different ways to look at the change, but I think there is a clear trend of towards legal conservatism in Israel. And, Israel had something that I would call an Israeli type of liberalism. It's not really liberalism in the full sense, but it had some kind of its own version of commitment to basic freedoms. I'm talking about the Israeli legal system within the Green Line, within the state of Israel itself. There were always areas that were like black holes where the physics of rights have been completely distorted, and security and things of that sort is part of those areas that were always distorted. And yet, a court in the beginning of the millennia would not allow the censorship of a film like Muhammad's, like Jenin. And a court today allows it, and we have, and this is not by chance. There was a generational change in the Supreme Court. The Israeli right that is dominating Israeli politics for a very long time has also put a lot of effort and resources into putting judges that are like themselves, more nationalistic, in the balance between national interests and individual freedoms, are leaning towards national interests. And so we see that cases in which the dissenting position or the dissenting voice, the minority voice, is winning are more and more rare. It is more and more difficult to get out of court in Israel with a victory for the person who criticizes the government policy. And that is a change that I feel in the work that I do. I have to say, and maybe I don't want to take too much time, but I have been litigating cases on behalf of Palestinians from the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip for years. I've been litigating cases on behalf of people that even in the eyes of Israelis have done much worse things than Muhammad, for sure. No Israeli would. And yet, when it came to Muhammad, that was probably the most contentious, the most poisonous, the most violent atmosphere in the courtroom that I've ever felt in any of my cases, because Muhammad touched on something, he called it the sacred cow, but yes, on the myth of the Israeli soldiers as moral beings, as the most moral army in the world. And it was not just anyone who placed that charge. It was Muhammad, the beautiful Arab, who before Jenin was the symbol of coexistence, the symbol of how we can look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we're beautiful, we have an Arab friend. And so because it was him, the backlash was so big. To couple that with the trend in Israel that is not directed only at Palestinians. It is now also directed at Jewish Israelis who are providing, dissenting positions and voices and are part of the struggle against government policies. We are all now under attack, and we are all now being delegitimized and incited against. Palestinians have been through that for many years, always. It's new thing that Jewish Israelis are also going through that, but that shows you that this is what is happening in Israel, and it is less and less possible to use the courts in order to provide an opening for the kind of discourse that we want to have in the public sphere.
Thanks. Two questions. I'm connecting two questions here that are to Mohammad. One is about so while this attack against you in Israel, was there international solidarity and support for the film from the international and the cause? And the other is, has the attack against you and the film kind of created a chilling effect against young Palestinian directors of filmmakers that are now afraid to express their views because they will experience what you have experienced? So one is about international solidarity, and did it happen, and what kind of support, and was the support also critical of for example, of the Cinematheque community in Israel for what they're doing to you? And the other is, has this had an effect on future generations of Palestinian filmmakers?
Yes, I have the honor of solidarity from many people abroad. People and associations also. For example, Amy Gutman hosted me in Democracy Now! Amy Gutman, yeah, and she gave me like a very big stage for more than 1 hour to tell about Jenin, about the persecuting, about the trials, about the whole story. This is one. I was invited also by Jews for Peace all over the world. In London, in England, and in America, in New York also. And besides, there were some screenings in Europe just for solidarity with me and with the film. It wasn't that wide, it wasn't that big or huge, but usually the leftist people, in Italy, in Germany, in England, in France, and America, the people who are who consider themselves from the left side of the map. And it was, most of it was more spiritual, more moral solidarity. And for the second question, it made double thing. Some people, young or not young, the film challenged them to make films like this film. For example, recently the committee of Jerusalem Festival decided to find a prize in the festival in my name, Mohammad Bakri Prize, and it was a very, I felt a very big honor that they named the prize on my name because of the film Jenin, Jenin. So if you are making a film and you are in this category of Mohammad Bakri Prize, you can have the prize, and it is about patriotic film, which deals with problems that belong to the people and inside the occupation, resistance against the occupation. That's the meaning of patriotic, not in the bad meaning, in the good meaning. And I believe this will encourage people, some people, to make such films like Jenin, Jenin. On the other hand, many directors will be afraid to do, will be thinking, why I need that? Why? It doesn't work. Because many people ask me all the years, if you knew that this will happen to you, were you doing this film? This is one of the questions that people ask me. And I say, yes, I was doing the same thing. I mean, if you believe in something, if you believe in something that you believe, how come you can regret? How can you regret about love? I mean, if you love somebody and you gave her all your emotions, and one day you are separating, can you hate her? How come? I mean, even if it is hurting you, even if you pay a very high price, you will think that you are regretting about your feelings? I don't believe that. I mean, if you love, you love, and you give without any khishbon. You don't think about what you will have, what matarviach. It is not a question of hefsed v'revach. It is a question
profit.
Yes, it is a question of belief. And when you believe, you love what you are doing. And when you love what you are doing, you cannot be fascist. You cannot be anti-Semist. You cannot be extreme. But I said, and I'm telling you now, Jenin, Jenin, Seret Ahava.
Jenin, Jenin is a movie.
Story.
It's a love story.
It's a love story between people. You know, some guy told me, I asked him, what was the most hard time for you in Jenin during the invasion? He told me two things. I didn't put it in the film, and I really regret that I didn't use that now, after all, but it's too late. He told me, when I wake up in the morning and didn't find my neighbors near me, their home was not there. My neighbors Where are my neighbors? Gloom. And he cried. He cried. And the other thing he told me, that he found המחברות של הילדים שלו,
notebooks, his children's notebooks,
and המבחנים,
and their test exams,
עם הציונים שלהם, הם היו תלמידים טובים.
With their grades, and they had been good students.
He didn't find that. He didn't find, and he started crying because he didn't find that. I mean, why I came to this, why I told this?
Because it's a story of love.
Yes. People are talking about their relation with the stone, with the tree, with the son, with the father, with the brother. They are talking about very humanic details with so much love. And also, and this is what may driving me crazy. The main character in the film say, and he is saying that with a very honest way. He said, I was ready to live with the Israelis in peace. I was hoping for their children the same thing I hope for my children. How can I come back to that feeling now after all what they did to me? How can I re-feel the same feelings that I had and believed in peace? How they can bring me back that feeling? Like he was like crying on that feeling that he had before.
Mm-hmm. And he was mourning.
At the end he said,
they made a mistake in their calculation.
Yes. They lose me. I will talk about myself. If I was not strong man, maybe I will become suicide bomber. If I was not strong man who believe in humanity and human being and seeing the full cup and not the empty cup, perhaps my desperation was leading me to kill myself and to kill Israelis with me. I'm sorry to say that. I will never do that. But this situation can drive man crazy. Desperation is death. המילה המקבילה למוות זה desperation.
The synonym for death
what
is
gave
desperation.
Me the hope? You know what gave me the hope? This man, Michael Sfard. And people like him, like you. Because otherwise, from where I can bring my hope? From where? From where? If they are not exist, if you are not exist, I mean, and we must win at least. And I must put my finger, I must insist to tell my people about these people. Also in order to help them against desperation. Also in order to create hope from nowhere. And you know what? I said that many times, in many occasions, in format like this. If I lie, and my lie can save the life of people, I will be a liar. Okay. I will lie. If it saves a people's life, why not? I will lie. In case, just in case, because I hate lie. But if my lie can help people to live with the new hope, ahlan wa sahlan. So, even if these people are minority, I know that. Like my side, I am minority also. But, המציל נפש מישראל כאילו הציל את העולם כולו.
Michael, can you translate that?
He who saved one soul from Israel, but there are two versions here in the Talmud, as if saved the whole world.
Speak.
And that is why no killing of innocent people is ever justified or can be excused. And I just want to say, there are, of course, Israeli families, Jewish Israeli families that suffered. The invasion to Jenin, the Operation Jenin, as Muhammad said, was immediately after a major suicide bombing in a hotel in Netanya. And their grief was heard all over the world. Their grief and their stories were told in Israeli media and foreign media. And what Muhammad has done after 3 weeks of siege on the refugee camp in Jenin, when the ICRC, the Red Cross, and journalists and human rights activists were all banned from entering the camp. And so no one in the world could hear what the people in the camp have to say. They were silenced by that siege. And Muhammad went into the camp with a camera. And he placed the camera and let people tell their stories, their experiences. Did they exaggerate? Were there some people who said things that were different? Maybe, I don't know. But the documentary is about allowing them to tell their stories. Exactly as Jewish Israeli families were allowed to tell their stories. And the fact that we are now in 2021 and an Israeli court says, no, we will not allow the world to hear the stories of these people because it sheds a dark light on how we manage our wars is just beyond my understanding. It is embarrassing, it is shameful, and it is, of course, immoral. And that's where, I'm in the fight to allow these voices to be heard. There are other voices who want to counter what they say. Fine, that's how it works. But to silence them, and by the way, it's also not, you asked me at the beginning, Neve, about the logic of the ruling. There's absolutely no logic here. We wouldn't have this webinar if not for the ruling. This film is 20 years old and suddenly it has revived. It has new life. So it's just beyond me to understand. It is all about almost Pavlovic reaction to whenever There is harsh criticism of the Israeli army. That's what happens. It's not rational.
Thank you. I'm afraid our time is up, and we have numerous more questions and people wanted to ask, and but I can't. I think the movie Muhammad is on YouTube. People are asking if they can access the movie, if they want to show it in other places. Is it on YouTube?
I think yes.
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 I think it's on YouTube and you can access it. And people are asking, people can send questions to me if they have another particular question like that. I'll find out and I'll answer. I think there was about a Spanish translation. But I want to end by thanking both Muhammad and Michael for this amazing intervention. The comments are that it's incredibly moving and important, and we were so lucky to have both of you come to this event and join us and share some of your experience and knowledge. And hopefully we can do it again maybe sometime. And so thanks everyone for joining us and for sending in the questions. And thank the two of you for coming. It's getting late in Israel, Palestine. And so have a good evening and bye-bye to all the participants.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Neve.
Bye, Neve.